moon, they have, so you can see within like 30-day window, some of them will, well, there's a scripture, star, so it is a great one with the women clothed, sun, and the men were 12 stars, and she being with pride, traveling, failing birth. Then appeared another one, great, great red dragon, 7 heads and horns, and 7 crowns. So it goes on, this dragon, like that may happen, but where it gets into. So in Virgo, the moon is a stars, but this comet that's slowly, and it actually does go in ready to birth, the birthing now of Virgo. Now, so this happened, but I mean, it happened as it's, and quite amazing because I looked up because they have different child. Quite literally, the child was delivered on Earth. Why you probably saw a lot of like capture ready to. Now, it wasn't my belief thought that figured out or anything, but you can definitely tell that are living in the my heart is always prepared of like having a relationship with father, and I do suggest other, if you don't feel like you're nice with them, go talk to loving. So that happened, and SGD Summit and well, meeting 20 of this, and it was supposed to just be a 2-day summit. It got dragged out to where they are trying to make the Saudi Arabia has its hands in it, and I don't know, it's just it's very interesting. You know, and biblically speaking, do men should be teaching of Christ, a covenant, the Holy One. So there was, this, I'm not actually sure if a covenant was signed, but what's crazy about Saudi Arabia in the just earlier this year, not very long ago, Mohammed bin Salman, which is the Saudi crown prince, saying that, oh well, if Iran it's their weapons, we definitely will. So you can really preach one mouthpiece, then out of the other half, like, oh well, I need to my Iran does well. So we're to be striving for that, right? So I found this a little disheartening, not gonna lie to you guys, because Salmon Briggs. He does oh haven't heard that story in a earlier bit. And is a possibility that there are still people that could have power and do really terrible things with it. But this great awakening has allowed our posture and our of what is completely different than what we don't know that people are nearly as tolerable things heard as they were in the past. So I am thankful for these, especially for myself, for my learning. I had never thought that would ever be. And it kind of seems like the Lord, I'm not going to say capture ready, but I do think in the middle of a harvest. So this probably geopolitical guys in this episode, but I do have a mention for my industry. But voting machine company that sued Mike Lindell, Rudy Giuliani, Fox News, Max, defamation back in the talking about system. This Dominion company is now being rated for bribery, according to the new indictment. So that is kind of exciting. It's a new level of exposure now that directly affect us at this moment. No, but it's actually like a cool little proof the non also had our Speaker of the House called out by States wasn't able to gain to that role. So there were some regulations for that role done so just yet, and Matt Gaetz calling him out. So that's another point on. Of course, there's been a little bit more exposure with the elites come out because of the destruction now. That's been really, and they did replace General Mark Milley with General Charles Brown. So a lot of dominoes are set in place to fall, just haven't quite fell yet. And one thing that I will give you guys is something that I saw online. It was by Mike Cohen. Really resonated with me. Those who disobeyed in China survived. Men who disobeyed Yuval got the shooting. Those who disobeyed lockdown mandates helped grind them to a halt. Made the New Mexico carry ban himself upwards. Say today's order are order more difficult to carry out. You're uncomfortable with start getting. So guys, with that, to getting back on track, and every Monday you're back from me. As always, you guys can follow me on Good Social and Instagram. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of The Outlook by Brooke. I just wanted to give y'all a good introduction today. Some of you may know me from the Cult of Conspiracy podcast, but today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into who I am and how I kind of got where I am today. So, growing up, my dad, he was older. He had me at 45. So his perspective on life is very, very different.
This is the Starseed Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Monet Florence Combs, quantum healer and hypnosis teacher who helps people all over the world discover the galaxy within themselves. Join me on an intergalactic journey as we explore what it means to be human in a world where we are just beginning to understand that we are not alone. Hello, my star children. You guys are doing well out there. I was thinking it might be fun to add a segment to my podcast. Since I've kind of been doing it anyway, but make it official, is having a galactic news portion of the podcast every week, since it seems like so many interesting things are happening all the time on this planet when it comes to space and us reckoning with the fact that we are not the only ones in this galaxy now. And which has been very, very interesting to watch how that plays out, and watch some of the, watch how the general public who's not really in the galactic community has been reacting. So this week, you guys didn't know already, there's a spaceship. That's the most vague term ever. The Osiris REX, deployed by NASA, a space capsule. That's what they're calling it. It's like, I don't know if this is a rocket. This isn't a shuttle. I don't know what they're calling it. Satellite. No, they're calling it a space capsule, which is it was a spacecraft that went and collected samples of the asteroid Bennu, Bennu, so that we could study what was in the samples. So I find that to be interesting because, a lot of times what happens when, for example, with the two alien mummies that they found in Mexico, they had certain precious metals that were on them as implants, like chest implants. And a lot of the metals, sorry, I'm not a scientist, obviously, that I'm just a science enthusiast. The metals that were on these implants were very rare to Earth. You don't really see them here. So I will be really curious to see if maybe there's some overlap there on what they find from this sample from this asteroid, and seeing where maybe that shows up in other places. So I found that to be interesting. The other thing is, speaking of those two aliens, there are a bunch of that they've run on them. At least the Mexican government has. Their scientists are saying, "Hey, release them to the greater community," right? Because people want other scientists to be able to weigh in, and not just the ones who have been handling them. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But you can see all of the scans that they've done so far on these what we are assuming to be real extraterrestrials. And you can see, CT scans, different types of scans that are pretty in depth that show that they are organically made and not like a Frankenstein type of a thing where they take different parts from different species and put them all together. They're one unit. So I found those to be pretty interesting. The other thing is, at first I saw them and I was like, oh, those look kind of like grays, maybe. Not kind of the grays that you see in a lot of, whether it's doctored footage or how they're portrayed in film, for example. And they're very small, very small. They're the size of, not even a toddler. So these guys are tiny, which is the other thing that's interesting. It made me think, I don't know that those are grays. And obviously, if they're mature, one of them had egg sacs within them. That makes me think, they weren't babies. So I'm not sure what type they are. I think I'm planning on doing a channeling session, or at least asking questions about this in a hypnosis session for myself soon, so we can maybe get some more answers. But for now, I'm in the hypothesis stage, which is just interesting. They're calling them humanoid reptilian hybrids because they have some reptilian features. So I don't know what these guys are or where they come from, but now I want to know. I'm going to see if I can find out more. From the horse's mouth. Yes. So that is the galactic news I have. I will link to the link in the show notes where you can look at those scans yourself and see what you think, right? See if they look authentic to you. To me, they certainly do. As they look like the CT scan, a lot like a scan I've had on my own body. It's like, oh, this is familiar. And so my own scan looks pretty similar to these aliens. Just have to say, we're not quite as different as people think. We're all, at the end of the day, made of organic matter if we are in physical bodies. So interesting. I also want to let you guys know that I am going to be running a little contest here. So between now and the end of next week, let's say between now and next Friday, I'm going to be running a contest I've done this in the past, a long time ago, for reviews on my podcast. It really helps me to have reviews, especially the type that are written out in text. So that's going to be the end of next week. That's going to be October 6th is when I will run this into. And so if you are enjoying my podcast, you don't have to write a review if you're not. I don't know why you're here if you're not, but if you are enjoying my podcast, you can submit a review on Apple Podcasts. So I know a lot of you listen on Spotify, but this particular contest is just for Apple Podcasts, because that's on Spotify. You can't leave text reviews. You can only leave a star or whatever review. So if you leave a review with a star rating and whatever star you want to give me, I'm not telling you to write only good things. You can write whatever feels authentic to you, but and then just leave a little about maybe what you find valuable or enjoy about the podcast. Then you can be entered in to win a free intuitive galactic reading with me, which is a $222 value. So if you want to do that, all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts. You don't have to listen on Apple Podcasts to review an Apple Podcast. You can access Apple Podcasts from any device, pretty sure. Even Androids, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But I think that's the case. Even if you don't use the app, I believe you can at least go to the website. I don't know. Give it a try. See if it works for you. I don't know. I'm an Apple user, so but if you go in and do that, and the thing is, I don't get email address or contact information of people who leave reviews. So all you have to do is just email Lisa, my assistant, at her email address is team@thestarseedawakener.com. After you do that, and that will enter you in. Now, here's the only thing is, if you have already left a review for me, unfortunately, you cannot be eligible because Apple Podcasts only lets you leave one review so that you can't go and spam people with good or bad reviews. So if you haven't left a review in the past and you want to be entered in this contest, that's all you have to do by next Friday is the 6th is to go ahead and leave the review and email Lisa, and I will put her email address in the show notes as well. And then what I will do is the following week, in the way I've done it in the past, I will pick a random person, and then whoever wins, Lisa will contact you to schedule the reading. You just have to have emailed her to let her know you left the review, and just what your username is, and then she'll know who you are. So that is the plan for that. And lastly, I have the wait list is all ready to go for the next round of quantum hypnosis certification. The plan is to open the doors to registration for that. I'm not going to do pre-registration this time around. I'm going to open the doors for the next round on probably on Black Friday, the way I did it last year. So just have that in mind if you want to have the information so that you be on the wait list and get first dibs to applying. You can go on starseedawakener.com/QHC, and from there you can go ahead and that wait list. And signing up for the wait list doesn't automatically mean you're obligated to be in the program. Just if you want more information, great place to go. So I think that's it for now. Let's get into the content of today's session. So last week, you guys heard me play the session about Nudriana's planet in Andromeda. I'm kind of hopping around with sessions with her. I started at the very beginning, I went to the end, and so now we're going to go somewhere in the middle. Because there's one session that I wanted to make sure I played for you guys that I found to be very interesting. Something that comes up a lot in sessions in general is ancient Egypt. And there's a lot of questions that I have personally had about what exactly was the ET's involvement in ancient Egypt. I know that was kind of going on parallel to what was going on in Atlantis and Lemuria during this time around the end of the last ice age, where there were still, the ETs were pretty involved in Earth and trying to help us out a little. And because we've been their project for a very long time, predating the last ice age, so genetically and whatnot. So so many of you, including myself, have always had a very special interest in ancient Egypt. And one of the it always comes up in all the documentaries, like whether it's Ancient Aliens or Ancient Apocalypse, with Graham Newton on Netflix. I talked about that a few months back. That was a really interesting one. And it's like how exactly were these structures built that humans did not possess the technology for at the time. They were very, very, very advanced at the time. And also, if we look at something that I've mentioned before is, if we look at the timeline of these ancient civilizations, the scientific community, the archaeological community, is that a word? I hope I said that right. Is, they have this timeline of humans were doing this at this time and doing this at this time, doing this at this time. But what we keep finding out more and more is that, humans had this advanced technology way before we thought they did. And we had advanced civilizations way before. And the scientific community, I might probably piss some people off, but I guess if you're I'm used to that, I guess. So the scientific community, archaeology community is anytime information comes out that is a threat to their timelines that they have established, if it means we have to rewrite the history books, they don't even want to go there, and they try to shit and prove otherwise, right? For whatever reason, humans, we tend to be stuck in our ways, don't like being wrong and rewriting history books. So all that to say that all signs point to this, star people being the catalyst for this technological shift on this planet. That, humans had potential but did not yet have the right technology, the technology to be able to build certain structures, such as the pyramids, right? The pyramids all over the globe that we are still learning about and uncovering. So, what does it have to do with the session today? This session, I found this session to be particularly interesting. We get to learn about some of that technology and how the ETs introduce that technology to Earth. Because I've had a lot of questions about this for a very long time. For me, it's always been how much involvement was there, right? Like I've had my own hypnosis sessions where Markara's in Egypt a lot in these sessions, and she'll be just kind of like overseeing things or just kind of stepping back and looking at progress on things of more of like a high level. But there's still a bunch of gaps to be filled. So this session closed some of those gaps for me, at least. And what's really interesting is the kind of story that goes along with it. It's not just about the technology. We learn about that at the end of the session. But now let's kind of like transition to talking about what else we can expect from this session and the other significant impact that I see here is that we're also going to be, you'll hear, well, first, let me give you just like a bit of a content warning here. The beginning starts out a bit heavy, where there's some human suffering involved. And you'll hear that my client, Sandy, she's trying to figure out how she's kind of involved in all of this and what's going on. You'll hear it all kind of float in as we're kind of trying to make sense of what's happening. This is a very interesting session. It's not linear, so it kind of starts kind of like how I've played her sessions on the podcast. Starts in one place, ends in another place. We kind of rewind, fast forward, do some of that. But so this is the other significant part is that the connection with some of these kind of different themes and goddesses. And you'll hear a couple different goddess names from Egypt who are mentioned, Isis and Nephthys. And with so Nephthys, who Sandy is connected to, she is the goddess of death, I believe. And so with Nephthys, yes, so she's the daughter of Geb, Earth, and Nut, who represents the sky, and the sister of Isis, and she is connected a lot with like death and darkness, but not in a negative way. And so here's what I mean by this, and here's why it's important. You guys have heard me talk a lot about not being afraid of the darkness, right? And how, as humans, we have a major issue with fear. And one of, I think, the most universal human fears is the fear of death. And I'll give you a little personal story here. So, this is a subject that's kind of close to my heart, actually. As you guys probably know, I used to be a birth doula. And so, being a doula, that's, you're kind of on one end of, one threshold, of the human experience. We have birth as a threshold. The other biggest threshold for a soul experience is the death experience. And I know that I personally definitely shared that fear of in a really, really, really big way. I've dealt with anxiety since I was very, very, very young. And I think some of my very first experiences dealing with anxiety in a big way was around fear of death. I was one of those kids that, oh my gosh, that was a mess. I just remember being maybe 5 years old was when all of my anxiety really started kicking in, and I was really scared of, I was afraid of going to sleep because I was afraid that I wouldn't wake up. And it was very, very intense for me. And I was afraid of other people dying. And it was just something that I fixated on a lot. And then, I had these experiences as I grew up into adulthood. I still had these fears, and then when I had my grandpa, actually, who I was close with, when I was in college, he passed away. And I had a lot of, when that happened, I wasn't as present as I wanted to be because I was scared. I was like 22 and really afraid to be around a person who was dying, actively dying, right? Because he had he had a pancreatic cancer and was in hospice, and it was just, it was really hard for me to visit him. I wasn't yet aware, like I didn't know what shadow work was. I hadn't really explored yet, why am I afraid of these things? Where does that come from? Is that even why should or shouldn't I be scared of death? And that became a big regret of mine, was that I wasn't as present when he was in the active stages of dying. And so then, years later, became a doula. I got really, just being a doula itself is a big part of that, is learning how to sit in spaces where death is on the table. Because when you are, working with pregnant people and their families, and there's always this kind of like looming anxiety for the person carrying the baby, the health of the baby, which leads up, from pregnancy into the birth space, right? And so for me, it was like I had to learn a lot about sitting with people who were fearful, who were terrified because of that looming threat. And so at that time, I kind
All
of,
right, good night, Joe.
I started leaning into this